I told you to come back safe. Zula was standing next to the medic as he was being patched up. She looked worried and pissed, which in Jax's eyes just made her look cuter. I'm fine. The armor took the brunt of the damage. I just got a bruise. He moved his shoulder lightly to check. Jup, he was good to go. Zula poked his shoulder. Ouch, hey. Fine? Fine? I don't want to hear you die on the other line. Besides, we are having dinner tonight with your father. How would that go if you were dead? Not so well, I guess? It's going to be fine. It's just dinner. Nothing fancy. The officer mess hall on the 9th Fleet capital ship, the Star Dreadnought SD Mjolnir, was empty except for one table containing the admirals and leaders of the different coalitions and a couple who felt very out of place. Zula leaned over to Jack as they sat down. Just dinner? Nothing fancy? I'm sorry, he whispered back before giving his father a look. He should have realized it was more when he had insisted on him wearing his old uniform. Captain Weir was also conversing politely with Vara and Grahad at the table. Admiral Carr and Grand Shadow Admiral Nimrod were discussing the latest Nalos fashion, which surprised Zula. The Shotolan Admiral Weru was in a debate with a human captain named Pyatt about the battle. Jack's father smiled at them as they joined and immediately focused on Zula. I'm sorry about this slightly formal but relatively informal dinner. Officers need to eat as well, you know? Zula smiled slightly. I can see where he got his sense of humor from. Don't tell him that. He might get annoyed. Zula barely hid her low giggle and looked at Jack. I do my best to keep him from becoming too annoyed. The dinner was relaxed, with relatively little discussion about the ongoing operation. Instead, they tried to charm each other with facts, stories, and curious but exciting knowledge of the waste universe. The food was deliberately chosen not to offend anybody. Zula thought they most likely had a separate chef for each species to avoid diplomatic problems. At the end of the meal, it became clear why Captain Weir was there. This was, after all, now a military operation, and belonged to a private company, not even a mercenary company. This was where they had to part ways. The company would be significantly rewarded and given operation permits for the whole of the Federation space. There were some matters that they would clear up so they could depart when these matters were dealt with. It would take a few days. Captain Weir was grateful for the rewards and wished them all a good hunt. She offered her company's experience with the bugs if they were needed. Zula and Jack looked at each other as they realized what this meant for them. Panic started to rise in Zula's eyes as she looked pleadingly at her aunt and uncle, but they did not respond. She knew this would happen from the start, but she always thought it would be longer down the line. Jack squished her hand gently and then looked at his father, who made a slight impression with his head. Jack realized that his father had something planned, as always, but this was not his father's doing. My dear officers, if we only have a day or two left, then I think we young ones would like to retire for the day and make the most of it. They excused themselves, and some smirks and polite chuckles from his words as they made their exit. Once they had left, Zula broke down as her silver tears ran down her blue-patched face to her red cheeks and onto her bluish uniform. It's not fair. I know. Jack didn't know what to say. She would be going to war, forcing him to stay out of it. His mind was racing. He could re-enlist. At least he would be close to her in the war, but they might post him elsewhere. Zula just held him close. I know it's the 4th day, but I don't want to be alone tonight. She looked at him with pledging eyes, and they returned to the ship. It felt like their worlds were torn apart, and they only had one night left. They were going to make the most of it. 3 years later, the human frigate Picaridon dropped out of lightspeed outside the Nalo homeworld, joining up with the 9th Human Fleet. The war had ended, and they had been requested to join the celebration. It had been deemed a suitable place to end the war as it was through the incident in Nalos space and the action of the Nalos government that the Karen plot was discovered. The Karen had been defeated again. This time, the surviving Karen had been handed over to human care. Princess Zula was standing among the Nalos representatives. Her role in the war had been the public face. She wondered if Jack would even recognize her now. They had pulled her from the front line and made her a media liaison for the military. She became quite famous as she reported on the war and did her best to promote the Joint Federation Force. She was seen as the figure of unity, and because of her, more Nalos joined the fight as well as traveled the universe to engage more with other races. The Nalos' home worlds had even seen an uptake of tourists because of her winning personality and open mind. She thought about all the soldiers she had interviewed from all of the Federation species. She even had the chance to sit down with some Karen civilians, yet there was one guy she had not seen or heard from. Jack had just vanished. She only knew that after he re-enlisted, he was given command of a task force and sent deep into enemy lines. She still talked with his father regularly, and he reassured her he was alive. The only thing she had from him was a gift, a stuffed red panda. It was her second most sacred possession. She watched as the soldiers representing all of the Federation planets marched past, trying to spot Jack, but he was nowhere to be seen. Maybe she was among the men in the mech suits. After the parade, she met up with his father. "I was told to give you this." His ship was doing sabotage missions inside the Karen space. They had a radio silent order for the whole duration. That's why we didn't hear anything. She looked at the recording device, confused. So why isn't he here now? She looked at it. It was a pad with a small holographic display. They are still in debriefing. All the agency wants is their intel. It might take a while, but with Earth fully accepted in the Federation, he would be allowed to take his leave in Nalo space. "I have a suspicion you will hear from him soon." Zula thanked him and returned to her duty, wondering what was on the recorder. When she finally was allowed to retire, she sat down in her office and turned it on. Immediately, an image of Jack appeared. "Hello there, my love. I hope you will see this soon. I have been assigned to SF Picaridin, and that is the only intel I'm allowed to share. But I can still talk to you about everything else. I miss you, and I'm pretty upset that my master plan of re-enlisting so I could fight by your side became such a fed-up. Anyway, I will do my best to ensure this war is as short as possible. I love." She started to cry. She looked at the storage, which held almost 3 years of daily updates. She started the next as she nearly forgot the world around her. He had been holding out for 3 years, waiting for her. She spent the whole night listening to Jack's voice. She missed him so much. When the morning came, she was a mess and did her best to keep a straight face. She met Garhad for lunch, who told her about a family dinner she would have to attend, and she could bring a guest if she liked, as it was an informal family dinner to celebrate the end of the war. She just looked at him. There were only 2 people in her heart, and none were here. "I would have to go back home then." Garhad smiled. "She is always welcome. Father would love to see her again. Then I will leave today for Slorico. Mum will be happy to hear that." She smiled at the thought of going home, especially now. She needed to show her the new pictures of Jack, so after lunch she contacted her office and told them she would take a few days off to rest. That she looked like she hadn't slept made it easier for them to accept it, and she was granted the leave. It was a short trip home, and when the transport landed outside her mother's inn, she felt at home. The place was so much better than what she had grown up with. Now it was the fanciest beach tavern and inn in Slorico. As she walked in, she was met with a full restaurant filled with humans. There were about 50 of them. Her mom squealed with joy as she saw her and held out her arms for a hug, which she immediately did. The few Nalos guests looked at the humans with amazement and curiosity. It was surprising how these humans were on their best behavior, and they would not be this well-behaved unless an officer were nearby. "What is going on? Why are there so many humans here?" "I don't know. They say something about being ordered on shore leave. They are great tippers. You know, they give extra money after drinking, like paying the staff for behaving properly. How do the waiters treat them in their home world if they have to bribe them?" She was gleaming at her proudly. "Where are the officers? And where is Siri?" "She is on the beach with the nanny." "When did you get a nanny? Was she vetted?" "I think he is quite vetted, thank you." "Go now." She stared at her and then walked through the room. Her uniform made the humans look quiet as they watched her expectantly. It was a little unnerving, but then she saw Siri on the beach, balancing on a human hand, having a serious discussion with this man. She quickly made her way towards them, ignoring the humans getting up to watch what was going to happen next. The human had his back towards her, seemingly strong enough to let Siri do her little trick easily. There was something terribly familiar about the man, and as she got closer, Siri peeked over his shoulder. Her reddish face and bright violet eyes brightened as she shouted, "Mommy! Mommy! Look, Daddy!" Then Jack turned.